Let me ask you about what's happening here at home, or perhaps not happening, when it comes to negotiations to reopen the government. There were more than 4,000 layoff notices called RIFs, or reduction in force announcements, that went out Friday to workers across 7 different agencies, including Treasury and Health and Human Services. Take a listen to how the president described this.
We'll be cutting some very popular Democrat programs that aren't popular with Republicans, frankly, because that's the way it works. They wanted to do this, so we'll give them a little taste of their own medicine.
How are you deciding who gets laid off?
Well, the main thing that we're focused on, Margaret, is ensuring essential services remain open. And obviously, in a government shutdown, we have limited funds to work with because the appropriations that keep the government running have not been made. That's thanks to Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. So we're trying to do everything that we can to ensure that low-income women and children get the food services that they need. We're trying to make sure that we pay our troops because that matters for national security. We also want our people to get their paychecks. That's where we've been focused. And unfortunately, what that does mean, Margaret, is that some federal bureaucrats are going to have to get laid off. This is not a situation that we're excited about. We want the government to reopen, but Chuck Schumer and the Democrats decided to shut down the government, and we have to deal with the consequences in the administration, so that's what we're doing.
Well, these aren't furloughs. These are notifications of being laid off, of losing their jobs. That's why it's a little different this time. And specifically, when it comes to what's happening within the health sector, CBS did confirm on Saturday that the Trump administration went and rescinded some of the layoffs of hundreds of CDC scientists who were mistakenly laid off on Friday and then told Saturday that's not the case. But some of them were involved with the federal measles response. Some of them were involved with the response on Ebola. How does a mistake like this happen? Did the White House even talk to the CDC?
Well, so two responses to that, Margaret. First of all, I want to assure the American people that the frontline healthcare workers, the people who monitor measles, Ebola, and other infectious diseases, those people are still on the job, and we're trying very hard to figure out how to ensure those people get a paycheck, of course, because we want them to be happy and healthy. We want them to be able to do their jobs well. But the second point, Margaret, is the government shutdown inevitably leads to some chaos. We are figuring out how to take money from some areas and give it to other areas. That chaos is because Schumer and the far left Democrats shut down the government. We have to remember, Margaret, that the vast majority of Republicans, and to their great credit, a number of moderate Democrats have consistently voted to reopen the government. But if Chuck Schumer and the far left Senate Democrats are going to shut down the government, that is going to lead to some chaos. So you ask, how does this mistake happen? It happened because Chuck Schumer shut down the government, and we're trying to make sure that essential services still function in the face of that shutdown.
But that was a White House decision to lay off these individuals. You heard the president talking about that. That wasn't Chuck Schumer's decision. I understand your broader point on the negotiations, but the layoffs came from the president and the White House.
But my point is, Margaret, that we have to do layoffs because we have to preserve necessary resources to do the most critical things that the government does. And in that phase, you're going to have some chaos. You're going to lay off people, frankly, Margaret, that the White House doesn't want to lay off. We would like to reopen the government and ensure these essential services stay on. But unfortunately, in an environment where we're dealing with limited resources, where the government is shut down, we've got to move some things around. And in that moving things around, there is some chaos, there is some unpredictability, but we're trying to do everything that we can with the hand of cards that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have dealt us. That's our solemn promise, and that's our duty to the American people, but there's going to be chaos. That's why we want to open the government. That's why we want the Democrats to accept that the government should be open.
But are you confident that these job cuts are legal, that these reductions in force during a shutdown are going to withstand legal scrutiny, given that some unions are saying this is a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act?
Well, we are confident, Margaret. Of course, we always follow the law and we always follow court cases. And we think that we have the authority to do what we need to do. I'm sure that some people will sue and that will get figured out in court. But the reality is, we have to remember, why are we in this situation, Margaret? All these conversations about whether it's a temporary layoff or a permanent layoff, we're dealing with a terrible, chaotic situation because Chuck Schumer and a few far-left Democrats decided to shut down the government. If they just joined with the moderate Democrats and the vast majority of Republicans, we can open up the government and all of these conversations will no longer be necessary.
When I pressed Leader Schumer on this program just last Sunday about this, about reopening the government, he said it's going to take getting everyone in the same room with the President of the United States. Only the 5 people, including the President, he said, can solve it. Why doesn't the President insist that lawmakers come back to Washington, sit with him, and talk this through?
Well, as Chuck Schumer said, it's not all lawmakers. It's the Senate leadership that really is driving this shutdown. The House has already passed a bill to reopen the government. It's the Senate. And again, it's a far left sort of contingent of Senate Democrats.
But the president says he's a deal maker.
Keeping the government shut down.
Why doesn't he force a deal here? Why doesn't he tell Republicans, like the Speaker, get your lawmakers back here, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question, and the answer is because this isn't a deal-making, this isn't a negotiation, this is hostage-taking. The Chuck Schumer has not said to us, this is what we need. He's said that unless you give us what we need, we're going to shut down the government. That is a totally different thing. If Chuck Schumer wants to come into the Oval Office or come to my house, he is welcome to talk about how to fix health care policy for Americans. Of course, we want to lower insurance premiums. We want to make sure that the skyrocketing health care costs of the Biden administration start to level off and hopefully come down. That's one conversation. But you don't come into the Oval Office and say, unless you, the President of the United States, give us everything that I want, I'm going to shut down the government. I'm going to deny low-income women and children their food benefits. I'm not going to pay the troops. That is what Chuck Schumer has put us in the situation of doing. We don't negotiate with a person who has taken the entire federal government hostage over a health care policy dispute. And I think that basic principle, you saw Barack Obama say this to Ted Cruz and a number of Republicans. We want to talk about health care policy, but we're not going to shut down the government over this. That's all that Donald Trump is now saying to Chuck Schumer and the far left Democrats. We are not going to negotiate over opening the government. We'll negotiate on health care policy, but only once you do your job and open up the people's government.
Okay, just a quick follow there, though. What is your vision for that health care policy? Do you want these tax credits to fade out over time, extend them, and then fade them out? Are you open to making them permanent?
Well, the tax credits go to some people deservedly, and we think the tax credits actually go to a lot of waste and fraud within the insurance industry. So we want to make sure that the tax credits go to the people who need them. We also think that Obamacare gave the health insurance industry a lot of ridiculous regulations that if we cut out, we could give people access to better health care at a lower cost. That's what we're working on. And again, I think there's a lot of agreement, actually, Margaret. That's the crazy thing about this. There's a lot of willingness to negotiate, a lot of willingness to compromise from both the moderate Democrats and certainly from the White House. But if the far left Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, are going to shut down the government and refuse to open up the government unless they get everything they want, that's not a negotiation. That's a hostage taking, and we're not going to reward that kind of behavior from Washington, D.C.
Now, let me ask you about the other diplomacy that needs to happen just up the street, frankly. You have called on Democrats to stiffen their spines to stand up to the President of the United States. At what point, though, does this pain become too much in terms of the cost of the shutdown? And when are Democrats going to show some flexibility on this?
Well, I listened to the vice president, and he's just not living in reality.
What do you mean?
Well, because there's no negotiations happening right now because Republicans are boycotting those negotiations. They are boycotting negotiations to reopen the government because they are desperate to raise premiums on people in this country by 75% in order to finance their tax cut for the wealthy. Their only priority is protecting the billionaire class and the corporate class. The other reason the House of Representatives isn't in town right now trying to reopen the government, because they are about to have enough votes to pass a resolution mandating the release of the Epstein files. So JD Vance and Donald Trump's number one priority is protecting billionaires, protecting corporations, and raising premiums, raising healthcare costs by 75% on American citizens. So yes, I think that Democrats should say, if you want our votes for a budget, it can't be a corrupt budget. It can't be a budget that is going to devastate the lives of middle-class families in this country in order to protect and reward billionaires. That's a pretty reasonable request.
You're talking about the premiums that will increase an average of about $1,000, I believe, for those who are using some of these.
Well, that's the
healthcare
average,
programs for the
but in
government.
Connecticut, some families will see a $25,000 increase in premiums. And again, in order to afford a $270,000 tax cut for the richest families in this country.
Because also it wasn't dealt with earlier when Democrats were in leadership here. But you did hear the vice president say when it came to health care The administration's open to a discussion. We want to lower insurance premiums. That was a quote there. Did you hear any chance at an opening?
I mean, there are no negotiations happening, in large part because the House of Representatives isn't even here. They've been on an unprecedented 5-week recess because they do not want to risk their billionaire tax cut. And they also don't want to talk about the president's lawlessness. I mean, that's the other thing that we have to talk about in this budget. If we're going to fund this administration, we need to fund an administration that is paying attention to the law. I would be a sucker, Margaret, to vote for a budget that allows the president to then go and spend money only in states that are run by Republicans and spend no money in states that are run by Democrats.
But this is just the 7-week deal that we're talking about at this point, the short-term
Correct. The long-term budget that we pass ultimately has to require that the president not engage in mass-scale corruption, but a short-term agreement, certainly is not going to fix all of the problems that exist right now in the way the president is running the country.
But you have been critical in the past of the tactic of choosing to shut down the government. You were in 2018, you were back in 2013 when it was a discussion over health care. This is what you said in 2018.
The future of the American healthcare system was a legitimate public policy issue, as is the security of our borders. But we shouldn't be having the discussion amidst a government shutdown, trying to use our nation's security and all of these federal workers and the work that they do as hostages.
Aren't you doing today exactly what you were criticizing then?
No, that was a fight over sort of the long-term structure of the American healthcare system. This is an emergency. In about a month, premiums are going to go up by 75%. And we have to make a decision whether this budget is going to allow for that to happen or to stop it. What is happening in Chicago right now is an emergency. What is happening at the FCC as they try to shut down free speech in this country is an emergency. So we have a responsibility in this upcoming budget to prevent disaster for families whose premiums are about to go up and to address the destruction of our democracy and the rule of law that's happening all over this country. Those are urgent matters.
You do not trust that if you vote to open the government and then have a separate conversation about health care, that there will be any follow through?
Absolutely
Because that is what the vice president was arguing here, that it's like Democrats aren't even saying what it is they want to negotiate over.
No, you cannot trust this administration. And I think it's important to remember that we didn't have a shutdown when Joe Biden was president. And the reason is because they didn't play the kind of games that Republicans are playing. Joe Biden and Democrats, when we were in charge of the Senate, negotiated with Republicans and avoided shutdowns. This shutdown is happening because Republicans are desperate to protect their billionaire tax cut. And all we are asking, we're not asking to fix the entire American healthcare system. We're simply saying, don't make things worse by raising premiums by people, in some cases by $25,000 a year.
But the minority leader gave an interview to Punchbowl this week. I mean, there is just also the bare bones politics of this. And in that interview, he said, every day this goes on, every day gets better for us. The Speaker of the House said that was a callous statement.
Well, they're sort of desperately trying to spin what Democrats are saying. Listen, our priority is the American people. And yes, it is true as every day.
But you've been critical of Schumer in the past. Back in March, you were saying we got to stand up and do something. Is this about the tactic of just saying, hey, we're standing up?
No, as every day goes on, there are more Republicans that are breaking with JD Vance and President Trump and saying, yes, we should be willing to sit down and talk about the healthcare crisis that is about to visit this country. There are more Republicans that are breaking with the president's regime of censorship. So as every day goes on, there are more Republicans that are willing to stand up and protect the American people, to try to stop the president's destruction of democracy. And hopefully at some point there will be enough Republicans to join us and try to protect people's pocketbooks, which are about to be destroyed. Their economic livelihoods are about to be destroyed by these enormous increases in healthcare costs.
Well, but in the meantime, there's also the not getting a paycheck problem.
Where's the House of Representatives, Margaret? They're on vacation. The only way you can solve a shutdown is to have two parties that are in Washington negotiating. This is pretty simple. Republicans are boycotting negotiations. They're in the witness protection program all over the country, refusing to even show up for work. If they're serious about sitting down and reopening the government, they would be in Washington rather than spread out all over the country.
I need to ask you as well about the shutdown and the cost in your home state. We saw from just USAA, which is a lender and a bank to many people who work for the federal government, they said that they've had to provide $150 million in no-interest loans to 45,000 people in just over 48 hours. That's a cash crunch for a lot of people. What's happening in Connecticut?
So, I mean, I'll tell you a Connecticut story. The day after the shutdown went into effect, I went up to see the National Guard at Windsor Locks Airport. We were deploying 500 Connecticut National Guard members to the Middle East. These were 22, 23-year-olds. None of them are wealthy. None of them are going to get paid on October 15th. And I heard the vice president on your show say that this is about the Democrats. The American people understand that the Republicans control the White House, they control the Senate, and they control the House. So when the vice president of the United States is saying this is all about Chuck Schumer, who the American people rejected in the last election, I think the American people see through that.
Well, the White House seems to be trying to take that issue off the table. The president posted on social media that they're going to repurpose funds somehow to pay the military, at least for this pay cycle. Is that sustainable? Is that legal?
Probably not. Again, we just had a little conversation about the White House's understanding of United States law, which is pretty tentative to say the best. The Speaker of the House, because I think to pay the military during a shutdown would require legislation. The Speaker of the House has taken that off the table. So, I mean, is Donald Trump going to say a bunch of stuff? Yes, he's going to say a bunch of stuff, but I don't see anything moving. The House, as Senator Murphy pointed out, the House is on vacation. So, no, I don't think that that's very likely.
Well, the Speaker says if the government wasn't shut down, the military would be getting a pay if Democrats voted for the short-term funding bill. But no one's working right now, as you just said. We'll have to continue to track this. Thank you, Congressman Himes. We'll be back in a moment.